What up, peeps? Joe Passarelli here, bringing you another installment of This Week in Wrestling History. June 4th, it was a Friday, June 4th, 2004. TNA Impact has its first ever episode on television. Of course, TNA was founded back in 2002, but before being picked up by Fox Sports Net at the time, and then eventually Spike TV, they were a weekly pay-per-view series, which was $9.99 a week to order, and I had ordered it a few times and checked out TNA, wanted to see Sting. I had heard he was in there, and that's when I saw AJ Styles defeat Jeff Jarrett on one of the shows in the cage match for their world title, and I was intrigued with TNA. That was the first time I'd ever seen TNA. Well, June 4th, 2004, TNA Impact, first ever episode. Absolutely monumental day, certainly a day that would change the business, especially a decade later. TNA Impact still on television, of course, has been through a lot of changes throughout the years. I remember actually seeing this live. I didn't even know it was going to be on. I hadn't seen any reports on it switching from a weekly pay-per-view to cable provider and Fox Sports Net. It was actually on Friday afternoons at 4 p.m. initially. What a horrible time slot. 4 to 5 p.m. Never forget that. But I was channel surfing and I saw and I caught the end of it. I'm like, oh crap, AJ Styles, TNA, it's on TV. Well, have some notes here. Of course, 2 years after it being a weekly pay-per-view, it debuted on Fox Sports Net on Friday afternoons. Of course, it would have eventually moved to Thursday evenings on Spike for initially an hour, 9 to 10, and then they would get 2 hours, 8 to 10 or 9 to 11. They've gone back and forth on that, and then who could forget in 2010 their brief run on Mondays, but we'll save that for a different video, shall we, brother? Yeah. But another thing about this show was actually the debut of the six-sided ring in TNA, which of course would become a staple of the company for many years to come. It would help give them the image that would help them stand out. Some people liked it, some people hated it, some people were indifferent to it, but certainly it was the first time on this episode, June 4th, 2004, not only the first ever episode of Impact on television, but the first ever time we saw the six-sided ring. Before this, the six-sided ring was exclusively seen in the Mexico promotion of AAA. That was the only place you really saw the six-sided ring, with the exception of TNA, which kind of debuted it in the States. Pretty cool. But some of the highlights from the card, we had Team International in the opening match, picking up the victory. This would be the legendary Mexican wrestler Hector Garza, as well as Amazing Red. A lot of people forget he was there in the early days of TNA. And Sanjay Dutt. They defeated Team Canada, the great Team Canada. A lot of these guys still employed with TNA, actually. The current TNA World Champion, Eric Young, Petey Williams, of course, being a big impact in TNA Impact while he was there, the Maple Leaf Muscle, and Bobby Roode, who were, of course, accompanied by the coach, Scott D'Amore, who really was a great manager in the early days in TNA. He really did a lot of great work, very knowledgeable about the business as well. So that was match 1, was Team International defeating Team Canada. Match 2, we saw Abyss, in what was likely a squash match, I'm assuming, taking on and defeating Shark Boy. Shark Boy, a lot of people forget, still had some momentum behind his character. Shark Boy was actually, first appeared on TV on the MTV series True Life, I'm a Wrestler, and I feel like TNA thought maybe they could catch lightning in the bottle, similar to what WWE did with The Miz, although that was early in The Miz's career before he had caught any traction. I don't even know if he was on TV yet or not at this point with the WWE. But Shark Boy was more than just a jobber at that point. Granted, he jobbed out to Abyss quickly, but Shark Boy at that point was coming off the reality television appearance and had some momentum behind him. Also on this card, we saw America's Most Wanted, one of the greatest tag teams in early TNA history. That, of course, being James Storm, the Cowboy, and Wildcat Chris Harris. They defeated Kid Cash and Dallas, also known as Lance Hoyt, for the NWA TNA Tag Team Championships. Let's not forget, the titles, especially the World and the Tag titles, were the NWA titles, as the NWA and TNA were co-promoting at the time. The NWA, I believe, left in 2006 or 7. I know Kurt Angle and the Dudleys had become part of the TNA at that point. But, yeah, we saw the NWA history there. And in the main event of the show, we saw, who else, folks? The phenomenal one, AJ Styles, who will be making his Rhode Island debut soon in XWA. Very excited about that. He defeated primetime Elix Skipper, Michael Shane, and Chris Sabin, who of course recently parted ways with TNA, a former TNA champion in his own right, in the main event of the first ever TNA Impact. But can you believe it, folks? TNA's been on television, been on cable television for 10 years. As I said, it really wasn't a great time slot in the beginning. It was on Fox Sports Net, what's now known as Comcast Sports Net, on a 4 to 5 p.m. slot on a Friday afternoon. But I feel like at that time, TNA was really growing in momentum and really garnering a lot of the interest of fans who were looking for an alternative to the WWE, fans of WCW, fans of ECW, which really just didn't get on board with the WWE after the invasion, after the purchase of WCW and ECW. So TNA really made a lot of strides, and really 2004 was a big year for TNA, and was the first year that I became a TNA fan. I know there's a lot of people out there who still support TNA. Big shout out to Gilberto Sorio from the NoDQ.com discussion group. I know he's probably going to like this video. It's one of the first TNA videos I've done, so big shout out. I like to give you a hard time in there. I'm not necessarily a WWE fanboy, as some people like to describe it. I'm just a fan of wrestling. I love Ring of Honor, and I'm critical. I call it like I see it, and look, TNA just hasn't measured up to what it was really until 2009. I felt like they garnered momentum, even though they had brought in a lot of stars like Booker T, Kurt Angle. Mick Foley had stated in interviews 2009 was TNA's most profitable year. Of course, Mick Foley was there for a brief time, but we all know what happened with Hogan and the change in TNA, which kind of began the beginning of the end of the descent of TNA, which they kind of plateaued in 2010 in terms of their growth and notoriety and momentum. But really, folks, none of it would have been possible without this date in wrestling history. June 4th, 2004, it was a Friday afternoon, the first ever episode of TNA Impact Wrestling, and of course Don West had those insane daily deals. Of course, big shout out to Don West. Purchased this action figure, one of the last TNA events I went to when they were in Plymouth, Massachusetts back in 2011. It's a Jeff Hardy limited edition action figure. It actually enabled me to meet Jeff Hardy, get some autographs with him. He signed that action figure as well as some other merchandise. And big shout out to the charismatic Enigma. He was very classy individual. I thought he was really good with the fans. And I saw him peeking through the curtain watching everybody's matches too. But TNA, say what you want about their product now, 2004. The genesis of TNA on television. The first ever episode of TNA Impact. Like, subscribe, let me know what you think. This week in wrestling history. Total non-stop action!